The small clinic in Mbale was quiet except for the faint hum of an old ceiling fan. Aisha sat on the hard wooden bench, her hands gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles turned white. The doctor's voice was calm but heavy, each word landing like a stone on her chest. "I'm sorry we couldn't save the baby." At first, the words didn't feel real. They hung in the air, slow and cruel, until they finally sank in. Her throat tightened, and her eyes filled with hot tears. She had dreamed of holding that child, of feeling tiny fingers curl around her. Now that dream had slipped away forever. Kato stood beside her, silent. She turned toward him, searching for his face, hoping for a touch on her shoulder, a whisper that they would get through this together. Instead, his eyes were hard, his jaw clenched. "This is your fault," he muttered, each syllable like a knife. The words cut through her deeper than the news itself. She wanted to speak, to explain, to beg him not to say that, but nothing came out. They left the clinic together, but it felt like she was walking alone. The afternoon sun was blazing, yet she felt cold inside. Around them, the streets were alive with people and noise, but her world had gone silent. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if she could hold in all the pieces of her breaking heart. Kato walked ahead without looking back, and Aisha knew something inside their marriage had shattered too. The walk back home felt endless. Aisha's steps were slow, her body heavy with grief. Kato didn't wait for her. He pushed open the creaky wooden door of their small mud-brick house and strode inside like a man carrying bad news he couldn't wait to unload. His mother, Mamanaki, was sitting on a low stool near the fire, peeling matoki. She looked up, her eyes sharp and curious. "It's over," Kato said flatly. "She lost the baby." The words hung in the air for only a moment before Mamanaki clicked her tongue loudly. She didn't ask how Aisha was feeling. She didn't even look surprised. "I warned you," she said, shaking her head slowly. "I told you she is too weak for this family. Now see." Her voice carried no pity, only the satisfaction of being proven right. Aisha stood just inside the doorway, her hands trembling. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to say she had done everything to protect her pregnancy, but her throat felt tight, and her lips wouldn't move. The smell of the cooking food filled the room, but it only made her stomach turn. Mamanaki's words were like stones thrown at her, one after another. "You should have married a strong woman," she told her son. "One who can give you children, not this." Her voice trailed off as she waved a dismissive hand in Aisha's direction. Kato didn't say a word to stop her. He just dropped onto the reed mat and began loosening his shoes, as if the conversation wasn't tearing Aisha apart. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in, the fire's heat making her face burn even hotter. She lowered herself onto a stool in the corner, her back to them, her eyes blurring with tears. Each word they exchanged felt like a conversation she wasn't meant to hear, yet it was about her life, her body, her pain. Mamanaki kept talking, her voice sharp, cutting into the silence between Aisha's sobs. "I knew from the day she stepped here she would bring nothing but trouble. This is a sign." Aisha's tears slid down her cheeks, hot and unstoppable. She stared at the earthen floor, watching the dust shift under her bare feet. She had never felt so small, so unwanted in a place she was supposed to call home. When Mamanaki finally went quiet, it wasn't because she had run out of things to say. It was because she had said enough to make sure Aisha knew she didn't belong. And Kato, her husband, the man she thought would stand beside her, sat there in silence, letting the blame settle on her like ashes from a dying fire. The journey to Kampala was supposed to be a small escape, a change of scenery after the heavy days in Mbale. But for Aisha, it felt like walking into a storm she could already smell in the air. Kato told her they were going for a family feast at his uncle's home. She stayed quiet the whole way, her mind still raw from the loss, her heart still aching from the words spoken in their home. The house was full when they arrived. The smell of roasted meat and spiced rice drifted through the air. Children ran in and out, laughter spilling across the compound. Women in bright gomisi moved from room to room, balancing trays of food and drinks. Aisha kept close to the wall, trying to avoid attention, but Mamanaki spotted her and gave a tight smile that held no warmth. When everyone settled under the big mango tree for the meal, the conversations turned to family news. Mamanaki waited for a quiet moment, then cleared her throat. "We have had some bad luck," she said loudly, looking around the table. "Aisha has lost the baby." She said it the way one might share a juicy piece of gossip, not a private tragedy. Heads turned. Some eyes widened in surprise, others narrowed in pity or judgment. Kato didn't flinch. In fact, he gave a small nod, as if confirming the story. That tiny gesture cut Aisha deeper than any word. The whispers began almost immediately. An aunt leaned toward another relative and murmured, "It's the second year now. Still no child." Another voice hissed, "Some women are cursed. It's best to accept it early." Someone else whispered that she must be unfit to carry the family name. Aisha's ears burned. The words reached her even when she tried to focus on her plate. She stared at the ground, pretending to be busy with the food she couldn't bring herself to eat. Every whisper felt like a dagger between her ribs. Mama Naki went on, shaking her head as if she were the one carrying the burden. I told Kato she was too fragile. A real wife should give her husband children. It's our way. She looked around, inviting agreement, and several heads nodded. Aisha wished the earth would swallow her whole. She thought of her own family far away, who would have wrapped her in comfort instead of shame. But here, surrounded by people she had tried to call her own, she was nothing but a story to pass around. Kato didn't defend her. He didn't tell them to stop. He just ate quietly, occasionally smiling at a cousin's joke, as if none of this was about the woman sitting right beside him. By the end of the meal, Aisha felt stripped bare, not just of her child but of her dignity. The feast continued around her, but in her heart, something else had died that day. It was late when Aisha heard the uneven footsteps outside. The night in Mbale was quiet except for the sound of crickets and the dull thud of Kato's shoes against the dirt. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, mending a torn dress under the dim light of a kerosene lamp. When he pushed the door open, the smell of alcohol rushed in before he did. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt half-buttoned, and his voice already sharp before he spoke. "So," he slurred, throwing his keys onto the floor, "you've decided to throw away my future?" Aisha looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was small, careful. "My child, my blood," he shouted, staggering toward her. "Do you think a man like me waits around for a woman who can't even keep a baby alive?" His words were jagged, cruel, each one tearing at her like broken glass. She tried to explain, to tell him she had done everything she could, that the loss wasn't her fault, but he wouldn't hear it. He kept pacing, waving his arms, knocking over a stool. "You have shamed me. Do you know how people look at me now? A man with no heir. A man with a weak wife." Her chest felt tight, and her eyes stung. She wanted to cry, but she bit her lip until it hurt, trying not to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Finally, he stopped pacing and leaned close to her face. "I should have married someone stronger. Someone who could give me what I deserve." His breath was heavy with beer, his words slow but full of venom. That night, she barely slept. She lay on her side, staring at the wall, listening to his heavy snoring. In the darkness, her heart pounded with fear, hurt, and something else she couldn't yet name, a slow, quiet anger. At dawn, the sound of him moving around the room woke her. The smell of dust filled the air as he pulled an old suitcase from under the bed. She sat up, her voice shaky. "What are you doing?" "Packing your things," he said simply, not looking at her. "You're leaving." "I don't need a wife who can't give me children." He folded her dresses roughly, throwing them into the suitcase as if they were rags. The soft blue kaitench her mother had sewn for her wedding day was crumpled without care. Aisha's hands trembled in her lap. She didn't move to stop him, partly because she knew it would be useless, partly because she no longer recognized the man in front of her. When he was done, he zipped the bag, pushed it toward her, and opened the door. "Go," he said coldly. "Before I change my mind." She stood slowly, her legs heavy, her heart heavier. As she stepped outside into the morning light, she knew that the life she had once dreamed of with Kato had ended. But she didn't yet know that something new was about to begin. The sun was already high when Aisha walked the long dirt road to her in-laws' compound. She carried the small suitcase Kato had packed for her, the wheels leaving faint lines in the dust. Her feet were sore, but her heart ached far more. She had spent the whole walk rehearsing what she would say, how she would explain that she never wanted this to happen, that she still loved her husband, that she only wanted a chance to make things right. When she reached the gate, the sound of chatter and clinking dishes drifted from inside. For a moment, she hesitated, her hand resting on the wooden post. Maybe they would understand. Maybe someone, an aunt, a cousin, would take her side and tell Kato to stop this madness. She stepped inside the compound and saw Mama Naki almost immediately. The older woman was standing near the doorway of the main house, her arms crossed, eyes narrowing as soon as they landed on Aisha. "Mama," Aisha began softly, her voice trembling. "Please, I need to talk. I didn't choose for this to happen." But Mama Naki cut her off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Enough. You've brought enough shame to this family. There is nothing left to say. Leave." The words hit Aisha like a slap. She glanced around at the familiar faces, cousins she had cooked for during holidays, aunts she had served tea to, uncles she had greeted respectfully for years. Not one of them met her eyes. They stood still, their gazes fixed on the ground or anywhere but her. Aisha took a shaky step forward. "Please, just listen. I said leave." Mama Naki's voice rose, sharp and final. "This is not your home anymore. A woman who cannot give her husband children is no wife at all. Go back to your people, if they will even take you." Tears welled in Aisha's eyes. She looked at the cousins, hoping one might speak up, but they stayed silent, their faces blank. The air felt heavy, pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. A little boy, one of Kato's nephews, peeked from behind his mother's skirt and stared at Aisha with wide, curious eyes. She forced a weak smile at him before turning away, her vision blurring. With her suitcase still in her hand, she backed away slowly, step by step, as if leaving too quickly would make the rejection hurt even more. The gate creaked as she pushed it open, the sound loud in the stillness behind her. When she stepped back onto the road, the sun felt harsher, the world emptier. She had come hoping for mercy, but instead she had been cast out completely, not just by her husband, but by the entire family she had served, loved, and called her own. And in that moment, she knew she truly had no one left but herself. Aisha didn't know exactly where she was going when she left her in-laws' compound. She just kept walking, her small suitcase dragging behind her, the heat of the afternoon sun pressing down on her shoulders. By the time she reached the taxi stage, her feet were blistered, and her stomach ached with hunger. She thought of Jinja, where she used to visit the big market with her late mother years ago. She remembered the smell of fresh fruit, the sound of women calling out prices, the way her mother would stop to greet almost everyone. She decided that's where she would go. The taxi ride felt longer than usual. Aisha sat quietly by the window, watching the roadside blur past. Sugarcane fields, tiny shops painted in bright colors, children waving at passing cars. She had no plan, no home waiting for her, but she refused to cry. Not now. She had cried enough. When she arrived in Jinja, she wandered the familiar streets until she spotted a stall selling hand-woven baskets. Behind it stood Miriam, an old friend from the market days. Miriam's eyes widened in surprise. Aisha? Where have you been? It didn't take long for Miriam to notice the tired look in Aisha's eyes and the small suitcase in her hand. She pulled her aside, and after hearing a little of what had happened, Miriam simply said, "Come. You can stay with me." Miriam's home was small, just 2 rooms behind her shop, but she cleared out the spare one for Aisha without hesitation. That first night, lying on a thin mattress with the smell of fried tilapia drifting in from the kitchen, Aisha felt something she hadn't felt in weeks: safety. The next morning, she woke early and joined Miriam at the market. As she watched women buying baskets and bead necklaces, she remembered the skills her mother had taught her when she was a girl: how to weave tight, even patterns, how to choose the right colors, how to make beads from paper and seeds. She borrowed a small bundle of reeds from Miriam and started weaving. Her hands moved slowly at first, but the muscle memory returned. The basket began to take shape, each loop and twist pulling her mind away from the pain and into the work. By the end of the week, she had made 3 baskets and a handful of beaded bracelets. Miriam let her display them on a small corner of her stall. To Aisha's surprise, a tourist couple bought 2 baskets immediately, paying more than she expected. The coins in her palm felt like more than just money. They felt like proof she could still build something for herself. Every day after that, she worked from morning until evening, weaving, threading beads, and selling what she could. She still carried the weight of her loss, but with each basket she finished, each bracelet she sold, she felt a little stronger. She was homeless, yes, but she was not broken. The morning started like any other. Aisha sat at her small table outside Miriam's shop, weaving reeds into a wide, sturdy basket. The market was busy, full of chatter, the smell of roasted maize drifting in the air. She had arranged her baskets and bead necklaces neatly on a mat, hoping to sell at least a few before the day ended. Around midday, a tall tourist couple stopped at her corner. They admired the bright colors of her beadwork and ran their fingers over the smooth weave of her baskets. The woman smiled warmly. "These are beautiful. Did you make them yourself?" Aisha nodded shyly. "Yes, I did." "How much for all of them?" the woman asked. Aisha froze, unsure she had heard correctly. "All of them?" "Yes," the woman laughed. "We're opening a crafts store back home, and I think these will be perfect." It felt like a dream. She named a price, trying not to undersell herself, and the woman agreed without bargaining. As the couple packed the baskets and necklaces, the man handed her a card. "We work with a crafts export company in Nairobi. If you can produce more, we can help you sell across the region, and maybe even overseas." That night, Aisha barely slept. The possibilities spun through her mind like the patterns in her basket. She began working harder than ever, waking before sunrise, weaving until her fingers ached. Miriam helped her connect with other women in Jinja who could weave and bead, turning her small operation into a team effort. Orders began coming in steadily. The export company featured her work in their catalog under the name she chose herself, Aisha Creations. Her pieces traveled to Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and beyond. Within 2 years, her life looked nothing like the day she had arrived in Jinja with nothing but a suitcase. She had her own workshop, employing a dozen women who were once jobless or struggling to feed their children. They sat together each day, sharing stories and laughter as they worked, their hands moving in harmony. Her designs became known for their bright colors and unique patterns that told stories, some inspired by her late mother, others by the quiet strength she had learned through pain. Tourists came looking specifically for her work, and local boutiques proudly displayed Aisha creations in their windows. One afternoon, as she stood in her workshop watching her team work, she felt a deep, steady pride. She had built this from nothing, not just a business, but a lifeline for herself and others. She still carried the memories of her loss and the cruelty she had faced, but they no longer crushed her. Instead, they fueled her. From the ashes of her old life, she had created something beautiful, something lasting. And this time, no one could take it away from her. It had been years since Aisha last saw Kato. In that time, she had built a life so different from the one she had left behind that it almost felt like a story about someone else. Her workshop was busy every day. Her name was known in markets across East Africa, and her bank account was healthy. She was no longer the woman who had once stood in his doorway begging for kindness. One hot afternoon, she was in her office reviewing orders when Miriam peeked in. "There's a man outside asking to see you," she said carefully. "He says his name is Kato." For a moment, Aisha froze. The name stirred old memories she thought she had buried. She told Miriam to let him in. When Kato walked into the room, he looked nothing like the man she remembered. His clothes were worn, his face thinner, his eyes tired. The arrogance he used to carry like a shield was gone. He sat down slowly, clearing his throat. "Aisha, I need your help." She leaned back in her chair, saying nothing. He went on, explaining how his family's business had collapsed, bad investments, reckless spending, debts piling up. His voice shook as he admitted, "I don't have anywhere else to turn. I need a loan to start over." Aisha studied him the way he had once studied her in the clinic, when she had been broken and desperate. She remembered the coldness in his eyes, the way he had let her cry without a word. Now the silence was hers to give. "You came to me for money?" she finally asked. "Yes," he said, avoiding her gaze. "I know I don't deserve it, but you have the means and I have no one else." Aisha's fingers tapped lightly on the table. She thought of the nights she had slept on a thin mattress in Miriam's spare room, the mornings she had worked with swollen hands to weave baskets just to eat. She thought of the way he had thrown her out as if she were nothing. "I built this from nothing," she said quietly. "Not because someone helped me, but because no one did." She let the words hang in the air, watching him shift uncomfortably in his seat. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand to stop him. "Kato, I'm not here to punish you, but I will not give you my hard-earned money so you can repeat the same mistakes. I learned to stand on my own. Maybe now it's your turn." His shoulders slumped. He nodded slowly, knowing there was nothing more to say. Aisha stood, signaling the meeting was over. As he walked out, she felt no bitterness, only a strange calm. Years ago, he had held all the power. Now she did, and she knew exactly what to do with it. The sun was bright over Entebbe, and the air buzzed with excitement. The community field was decorated with colorful cloths, music played from loudspeakers, and the smell of fried chapati and grilled meat drifted through the air. People from all over had gathered for the charity event, a day meant to raise funds for local projects. But this year, the organizers had hinted at a special announcement that had everyone curious. Aisha arrived quietly, dressed in a simple but elegant kaiten. Even though her name was now well known, she didn't walk in with the air of someone trying to impress. She greeted people warmly, hugged old friends, and took her seat near the front. Her workshop team had come too, beaming with pride. When the speeches began, the event's host stepped up to the microphone. "Today, we are honored to have among us a woman whose hard work and dedication have inspired not only this town, but women across East Africa. And she has something important to share with us." He turned and gestured to Aisha. She rose slowly, her heart steady. She took the microphone, her voice clear and calm. "Years ago," she began, "I lost something precious. I was told I was weak, useless, and unworthy. But I stand here today to say, no one has the right to decide your worth but you." The crowd murmured in agreement. She paused, letting her eyes scan the people before. That's when she saw them, Kato and Mamanaki, standing at the back. They looked older, more worn, and their expressions were unreadable. "I know what it means to feel helpless," she continued. "That is why today, I am donating 50 million shillings to build a women's health clinic right here in Entebbe. And it will bear my name, Aisha Women's Wellness Center, because I want every woman who walks through its doors to remember that they are not alone." For a moment, the field went silent. Then cheers erupted, loud and long, rising like a wave. Women clapped, men whistled, children shouted her name. People stood to their feet, applauding her not just for the money, but for the statement she had made. In the back, Kato kept his arms crossed, his jaw tight. Mamanaki's lips pressed into a thin line. They didn't clap, didn't move, just stood there watching as the woman they had once dismissed as too weak was celebrated like a hero. Aisha handed the signed donation papers to the organizers and returned to her seat. People came to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her how her story had inspired them. She smiled, feeling the warmth of their words, but her gaze didn't wander back to the corner where Kato and his mother stood. She didn't need to look at them to know they had heard her message loud and clear. The crowd's cheer said it for her. The girl they had tried to break had not only risen, she had changed the game entirely. Sometimes Aisha still thought about that small clinic in Mbale. The dim light, the doctor's quiet voice, the way her world seemed to collapse in one moment. Back then, she thought it was the end of her story. She thought nothing good could grow from that kind of pain. But now, years later, she saw it differently. That loss had not destroyed her. It had shaped her into the woman she had become. She had turned rejection into resilience, shame into success. Her baskets and beadwork had built more than just a business. They had built her life again from the ground up. And now, she was using that life to pull other women out of the darkness she once knew too well. Through her foundation, she helped women escape abusive homes, start small businesses, and learn skills they could rely on. She listened to their stories without judgment, because she had lived them herself. She gave them more than money. She gave them hope. Sometimes, she visited the nearly finished Aisha Women's Wellness Center in Entebbe. She would walk through the bright new halls, imagining the women who would one day come there for care, for safety, for a fresh start. And every time, she felt that same steady pride in her chest. Her life had taught her a truth she would carry forever. No one can truly keep you down if you decide to rise. People could take away her home, her marriage, even her dreams, but they could not take away her will to stand back up. And standing, she realized, was only the beginning. Now she was lifting others too.